listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Welcome along to my show Straight to Video. Always appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you're all well. Now, if you're like anything like me, being a rock and metal fan growing up through the late 80s and 90s, magazines such as Kerrang, Raw and Metal Hammer, they were your Bible here in the UK. It was such a big deal heading to the newsagents and picking up the latest issue from the shelves and just scanning through those pages to see what your favourite bands are up to. For most of us, for a while, this was the only place to see photos of the bands other than album covers, so these images would adorn our walls and we would read the articles religiously. One name from Kerrang that many of us would become familiar with is that of today's guest, Ray Zell. Whether it be his reviews, his articles and columns, but more than likely you will know Ray as the creator and artist of the legendary comic strip character Pandora Peroxide. Heavy metal and hard rock's baddest bitch to ever come along, who pulled no punches with the rock stars of the day. If your band got featured in a column, good or bad, you knew you were onto a good thing, and throughout the 80s and early 90s, Pandora was a true force in the pages of Kerrang. As the decade's music changed, she would hand the reins over to her niece Pandora, and today both are still going strong on Ray's brand new website, rayzell.com, which is a feast of fun for rock fans, featuring classic Pandora strips, which you can even purchase the original artwork, along with brand new blogs and loads of great new merchandise. In my chat with Ray on today's show, we discuss all of this, from the creation of Pandora Peroxide, the journey both she and Ray have been on, Ray's time fronting the band Marionette, being roommates with Ginger Wildheart, and what was really interesting was Ray's take on the whole grunge and alternative movement in the early 90s. I've often discussed the effect that it had on the music industry with other musicians, but to hear Ray's perspective as an artist is pretty eye-opening too. Once again, this episode of the show is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo, an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for a couple of years, and it's regularly used to create the podcast episode artwork you see each week. Affinity is an amazing and extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market, and now is a great time to get on board with Affinity Photo and also Affinity Designer and Publisher, as they've just announced a brand new version 2 platform with some great price discounts, so please check them out at affinity.serif.com. Alright, as mentioned, Ray has a brand new website at rayzell.com and is very active on Instagram too, so it's well worth checking both of those out after I talk. But right now, please enjoy my straight to video chat with Ray Zell.
What do you want now?
I'm sorry.
I will phone the police if you call one more time.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm okay. I'm hanging in there, hanging out here. Is there just a nice touch of retro crackle? That's all I need to know.
Exactly, mate, exactly.
It's old school. It's like playing vinyl.
Things are exciting at the moment for you with a brand new website featuring all things Pandora and Auntie P, the original Pandora Peroxide, which has just hit the internet.
To be honest, I think other people seem more excited than me, which makes me feel a bit guilty. You know, I am autistic and I don't really, there's only certain things that get me excited. It's kind of like my girlfriend says to me, sometimes when I draw a birthday card to someone or draw a picture of someone and put in a frame for their birthday, I'm at a birthday party or something and the whole night it's like, I can't believe it. This is amazing. This is the greatest gift I've ever received. And I'm like looking at them like, what is wrong with you? And my girlfriend tries to explain to me, but they're flattered. They've never had anything like that. And it's from you. But to me, it's just like something you can do. It's like somebody praising you for walking up the street. Like, that's amazing how you walked up the street. And you go, well, I do that all the time, walking up the street.
When was you diagnosed with autism? Because, I mean, growing up through like the 70s, 80s and stuff like that, was it something that people focused on or something that came to light later on?
To be honest, when it's that thing where I always had people tell me I had an odd take on things, but it was only about 5 years ago or something, 4 or 5 years ago, after years and years of therapy, people thinking I was depressed and this and that somebody said, have you ever been diagnosed for Asperger? You're completely Asperger, because no one ever told you that. And then I got tested for it. But again, like they said to me, you don't develop it. It's not something that happens. You've always been Aspergic. Like if you were a kid at school, your mum would pull the teacher aside and go, can you be careful with him? He might be temperamental. He might be a bit alienated because he's Aspergic. But you went through your whole life oblivious. But again, whenever I told anybody about that I was Aspergic, no one was shocked. It was like, well, yeah.
That's what
and you're
it
like, oh,
is.
okay then. Well, that's all right then.
So what brought this whole website thing together and like Instagram page and all that kind of stuff? Was there somebody in particular that kind of triggered it off?
Since Kerrang kind of stopped being a weekly magazine, I just kind of stopped. Bizarrely, I kind of enjoyed it. I mean, after years and years and years of drawing Pandora every week and making it topical and blah, 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 it was actually kind of nice.
Right.
It was like a reprieve. I used to look at my art table and go, I can't go back there. I mean, a year had gone, a year and a half had gone, and I hadn't drawn anything. And I'm like, I'd say to my girlfriend, I don't know if I know how to do it anymore. I'd literally removed myself from that mentality. But it was weird. Round about kind of last Christmas, New Year, ideas started coming into my head, like the T-shirts on the website. I saw those in my head, and I'm like, I want that on a T-shirt, this kind of fierce Pandora face staring you down. Like, if you walked in a room, you're not going to miss the person wearing that T-shirt. So I was like, well, but what else would I do? But then what else would I do? For the first time after my brain being hibernating for 2 years, these ideas just started sparking and igniting. But before then, Julia recommended I do a site just selling old comic strips, but I said it has to be relevant. There's got to be something in it to show that she's functioning now. And it was perfect because Pandora could do a new school blog and Pandora Peroxide could do an old school blog.
I love that about the website. Yeah, that's great. You got those two contrasting things.
But that's what I mean. I've got all generations.
Yeah.
You know, and it's only just occurring to me how many generations red hair Pandora has got. Because I've got people from 16 to like 46 that she's inspired, and you're like, blimey, because she hasn't aged since the mid-90s, you know?
Has there ever been any like other characters come and go over the years? Is that anything you've tried, or has Pandora's adventures always kept you busy?
I mean, I know it sounds weird drawing one comic strip a week, but because it had to be up-to-date newsworthy, I used to end up penciling, writing it, drawing it, inking it through the night, and I would then be jet-lagged for a couple of days, and by the time I got my act together, I was thinking about the next one. So I think that's why it was actually a nice reprieve to be able to start again and do this all fresh. Do you know what I mean? And also, what is fantastic is not being edited or not having anybody say, oh, that's a bit inappropriate, or can you change that? Because honestly, when you've been up all night, 24 hours straight drawing a comic strip, and then you take it in like, because I used to hand deliver it, and then by the time I got home, I could have an email going, oh, we think this is a bit inappropriate.
Oh, no.
Can you change this? And I would be up another night.
Yeah.
And so I can't even put into words the mindset you're in the middle of the night. And then you go too safe.
Yeah.
Too safe to make sure it gets printed. Pandora was never originally invented to be safe or PC or woke. Do you know what I mean? And yet that started interfering, I think.
Yeah. Do you think people sometimes wanted just to put some input in just so they could say they could put some input in?
I know what you're saying. You know, obviously it's a magazine that was on newsstands, and we lived in a different time where people got easily offended and easily... I mean, this is an idea of how confusing editorial can get. There was this point where... am I allowed to swear?
You can swear as much as you want, mate.
Fuck, really?
Yeah.
Once a previous editor got in touch with me to say I couldn't say fuck anymore in the strip.
In Kerrang? Oh, come on, heavy metal magazine.
Well, exactly, but I had to asterisk. If I said fuck, I had to put stars in the middle. And it just sort of, it's like self-editing again. They say the worst kind of editing is self-editing. So the week after I was told that, there was a full-page picture of Flash wearing a T-shirt, and in bold white letters on black, it said, fuck, fuck, fuck. When I questioned, I don't understand. In a little tiny comic strip with little tiny word bubbles, I can't say fuck, but if Flash wears fuck on a T-shirt, that's okay. And they went, it's just different. And I went, but no one could explain why it was different, just I had to accept it was different. But to me, that was confusing, and it still is confusing. If you can explain that to me, because I can't explain it to myself.
My initial thing is on that one, it's Slash. Let's not offend Slash. Let's keep him on board.
But as you can see from my perspective, and I'm holding you responsible.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Yeah, fair enough. We're not going to give Slash a bit of gaffer tape to stick on his T-shirt.
Yeah, I could have blacked it out. But like I say, things like that. Well, there was another time where someone had to sit me down and explain copyright to me after all these years. And I said, I do know what copyright is. And they was explaining to me how I couldn't have like Batman or Superman in the strip. And I go, if I've ever done anything like that, I've called them like Spider Guy or Bat Geezer, and I've changed at least 5 obvious things, put a B on his chest instead of a bat and all that.
Exactly.
But I did say, but out of curiosity, last week there was, who's the singer of Black Veil Brides? Andy, because he's a big Batman fan. They took a photo of him drawing proper Batman from his perspective, the nearest appropriate Batman that looked like Batman. They didn't go, make sure he doesn't look exactly like the DC character Batman. I said, but it's so funny. You're saying to me, you can't have Batman in your strip. I said, yeah, he drew Batman, and you had a big full-page picture of him drawing Batman.
There you go.
And again, they went, yeah, but it's different. And I went, no, but just tell me why it's different. They went, it's just different.
Oh, man.
It's just different.
Crazy.
So that would stand up in court, you see. The lawyers and the judge would want to know why, and he'd go, my lord, it's just different. Well, okay then. That's okay. That covers all copyright laws. It's just different.
Meant. What's super cool on this website is that people can actually buy the original hand-drawn Pandora comic strips from over the years. Did you have all these like carefully stored away? Are you pretty good at that?
I wouldn't use the word carefully.
Okay.
No, it would be that thing where I would open a drawer, open a cupboard, I'd be looking for something, a photo of something. Like I had a photo of me and Elvira and I could not find it. And while I'm looking for this photo of me with Elvira, I started coming across stacks of old strips that I'd shoved up against a wall or shoved in a cupboard or shoved in a box.
How big are they, just out of interest?
The full-page black and white ones are like A4, and the colour, more modern, Pandora, as opposed to Pandora Peroxide, the colour ones were like a different size.
Fair enough.
So basically, yeah, I used to have to chop the top off of A3. So one was A4 and one was sort of like lengthwise was A3. See, I'm also number dyslexic, so trying to remember things with numbers in is not easy for me.
Will it be tough for you to see them go? You're selling these on the website. Are you quite materialistic, or will you be like, no, let's get rid of them?
No, not at all. It's weird. If I go around someone's house and they've got their own artwork on the wall, I couldn't have my own artwork on the wall. I would just be criticising it. And anything of mine I look at, I'm like, why did you do that? You were lazy with that. You should have took more time on that. So I could not bear to have my own artwork on the wall. My rule with Pandora's up to literally right now, doing it since 1984, my rule was the first person who got in touch with me, be it a band member, be it a press officer, or be it a fan, the first person who got in touch with me saying, is there any chance I could have the original to that strip, they got it. That was the law. It was first come, first serve. And sometimes a press officer would get in touch with me and go, that strip, is there any chance we can buy it or purchase it or anyway? And I'd go, but I gave it to a fan like 2 days ago. And they're like, you gave it to a fan? Like I've got to go back and tell this band member that a smelly, grotty fan
so good.
has that comic strip.
Oh, I love it.
But I have never, ever, and it is still weird, seeing them with prices on. I have never, ever charged, a Kerrang reader for any original artwork. My payment, as corny as it sounds, I love putting in an envelope and knowing, next thing I would get something back from them, going, oh my God, I can't believe it. I heard someone once I gave, the mum told me the kid put it on the wall in a frame, and every day 3 or 4 friends from school would come home with him, and they would just stand there looking at it. But every day it was another 3 or 4 kids. And what's bizarre is, because I don't do digital, is people seem to be stunned by a piece of Tipex or
I think that's great.
A little piece of pencil going off the edge.
Yeah.
That seems to be the big thing. Like, you can see the mistake. You can see where he corrected it. That's so weird.
They're a wonderful souvenir for anybody who loves them all. I was looking through them today. I've got my eyes on the original Extreme one you did, because I love how you did Pat Badger, the bass player, on a surfboard. I always remember that one. That's quality.
Well, he did look kind of like a surf guy, didn't he? You know what I mean?
He did.
He had that kind of thing.
Definitely. Other than that, you're selling these original ones, but people can have their own own cartoon hand-drawn by yourself with Pandora or Pandora Peroxide.
Yeah, but again, it's just things over the years. That's what people used to ask me for. But again, I used to just be happy to do it for free. But I mean, there was times, I don't mind saying, I mean, it's why I don't do social media anymore, because when I used to be on MySpace, I used to keep getting these requests, like people going, oh, it's at my wedding, or it's at this, or it's that. And I would end up doing work for free for people that I barely had time to do Pandora, because I almost was working pro bono doing, because I was just flattered that they wanted it. But guess what? As people kept telling me, like Julia, who encouraged me to do this, I mean, I'm just like the face of it. It's so funny. People get in touch with me telling me, thinking that over the last, few years, I've suddenly developed a brain and a technical know-how. And they go, wow, your site's so cool. You're really done. I can't believe you've turned into someone that can put that together. And I'm like, I'm not. I mean, the first time I saw it, the first picture where Pandora and Pandora Peroxide are just laughing their heads off.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. I mean, I wanted it to be fun because, no offense to rock in general, but I mean, I came from a time where it was only about fun and drinking. When I get down, I don't play Depression, I play Van Halen. You know what I mean? I play David Lee Roth, and I'm back.
You want something to take you out of that, or at least pull you as far from it as you can.
Exactly. I don't wallow. I want to be out of that. And so I think wallowing in depression and putting on music that kind of suits your mood, that's not what rock music was to me. Rock music was to snap me out of my mood. Well, I mean, also going back to early days when I was on the dole, buying a Kerrang before I worked for it was like a big luxury. So, you read it back to back and then again and again and again and put a poster on your wall. I bled a Kerrang dry, and it was all about drinking and fun. And suddenly I'm working for a magazine where all the bands are depressed and all the bands are suicidal and all the bands are... And you're like, was I living in a world where people were all secretly suicidal but pretending they were going out and partying? Or now... is it about it's cool to be depressed, so now I'll be depressed? It was really confusing.
It was such a change, yeah, definitely. But you make a point, like you say, like looking at this website, it's like, oh, wow, it's so cool to see. You've made a point that all your things are hand-drawn in pen, not digital images. Have you stayed fast and hard against making that jump to digital, or is it just something that doesn't interest you?
Well, I mean, there is the point that I don't know how to do it. The thing that breaks my heart is I've watched people do digital artwork, and it takes half the time what I do. When there's a big area that needs colouring in and you watch somebody just press a button and it goes blue, and I'm sitting there for 3 hours with a blue pen.
Trying to make it all look even and smooth.
I mean, I have to deal with smudges. When I ink my artwork and then rub it out to photocopy it and then colour it, I lose the integrity of the original ink. So even after I colour it, I have to go over every single line again. But that's my process, you know what I mean? But again, I do have a lot of problem with digital art I've seen, because people look like... I mean, I see a lot of art that it's just somebody has traced over a known photograph and then coloured it in digitally, and yet on a forum underneath it'll be like, you're a genius, this is amazing, this is fantastic. But to me, in my day, when I was a kid, that would be like somebody bringing in a colouring book and going, look at how I coloured this in. And we'd go, it's a colouring book. And if someone else showed us something drawn on tracing paper, you'd go, but you traced it.
You just traced it, yeah.
Now, that's applauded. Because I think a really non-artistic person is just seeing it as, wow, that's drawn lines and that's colour. When in actual fact, it's just a tracing coloured in digitally. I saw it on a cover of a rock magazine once. Someone had obviously been paid to draw a picture of a certain rock star, and the person that got to do it had just found a photo of this famous rock star, and I could see that you've just drawn around a picture.
Usually like photos you know really well, you can tell like it's a bit too accurate.
But the thing is, I was talking to the magazine, and they were like, really? I went, look in the eyes. Can you see a soul? Can you see a soul in their eyes? And they go, I know what you mean. I mean, it's because it's dead. I mean, when I draw something, I draw it freehand, and I draw from a photograph, but I kind of enhance. I kind of cartoonize. I make it larger than life. But when you just draw around something, you're ending up with less, because it's stilted. You're not enhancing. You're not bringing out. You're not making more pretty or making more deformed or hooking Alice Cooper's nose more than it is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're restricted to what is, and I don't like what is.
I did come across quite a few artists today that cite you and Pandora as an inspiration for their current work. So does that make you feel good?
Well, I mean, there's one lady who draws all the Bowie stuff.
I saw that. That's amazing. I remember seeing that a while ago.
When I came across that on one of the posts on Instagram, she's going mad about a used Pandora that she bought. And I mean, I would have given it to her with honour, you know, and she's bought it and is excited that she bought it. And she says the 15-year-old me is going crazy right now.
Yeah.
I like people that haven't entirely grown up. I know I haven't, so I only relate to people that have still, you know, haven't let their childhood go.
No.
You know what I mean? They haven't cast their childhood adrift.
Where do you take your original art influences from? Was you a big comic book fan growing up?
No, well, as a little kid, it was Superman.
Right.
All I did was draw Superman, and at the end, because I could draw Superman without looking or without copying, I know it sounds weird, but in primary school, you were the best artist in the school.
Yes.
Because you could draw Superman without looking anymore. And then you start drawing Superman in your own poses. So, I mean, I was pretty much brought up on DC Comics, and then at one point, I think I had a whole Marvel phase. I mean, like Stan Lee was my influence as a writer. You know, Jack Kirby and a lot of classic Marvel 70s artists. You know, I mean, a lot of comics I look at now, I'll have this great cover, but the person inside isn't the artist on the cover, and it will be digitally overcolored to the point where the artist must be distraught because the beautiful line drawings are buried under the overkill of digital explosions and, you know, sort of overcolored. Some things are too much for me.
Could you ever see yourself making a living as an artist growing up? Did that back then seem as like a feasible career whilst at school? Was it encouraged?
When I was little, there was a comic strip in the Daily Mirror called Garth.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, he was like sort of a Superman, Doc Savage. He was like a time walker. He seemed to be able to walk through time, you know, and he was a big square-jawed, but the artwork was just beautiful. I used to actually cut them out and put them in a scrapbook in order, you know what I mean? And then I didn't know at the end of the year they were just going to bring out a book with all of them in it anyway. But I used to think, I'm going to draw Garth one day, and then it was, no, I'm going to have my own comic strip character. That's what I'm going to have, is my own comic strip character. But then Rock came along and sort of threw me off course, and now I want to be Rock and comic book.
Who was the band to blame? I know you're a big Kiss fan, but who was the band to blame for that?
Again, I suppose it was being visual and liking, you know, visual stuff like Alice Cooper, and even though I wasn't a fan of them, even Wasp and Twisted Sister, they were still fun to draw. Yeah, I mean, you know, like Kiss, Alice, when I first started drawing Pandora, even Rothschild, you know, they were fun to draw. Again, going back to the grunge thing, it was really weird drawing, you know, like Eddie Vedder.
What are the characteristics as such, that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, you were suddenly drawing just straggly hair, especially when it was in black and white. You know, black and white comic strip like Pandora Peroxide was at the time, and trying to capture somebody, you know, with just a face with brown hair. And
he's not doing some David Lee Roth jump from the drum rise or anything like that.
Exactly. It was like, you know, like Roadrunner hitting a real-life brick wall. I mean, suddenly it was all depression and misery, and that's not why I drew comic book style. I wanted larger than life. I wanted an escape from reality. I didn't want reality.
How did Pandora react to that? Do you remember?
There was one where I think she was actually heading to Seattle with a missile launcher.
So good.
But at the end, I think she kind of succumbed. I mean, suddenly you realise...
She had to.
I remember at the time, all the kind of marquee level, you know, the kind of nights at the marquee that were like Tuesday and Wednesday, you know, the bands that got the bad nights and put on a 3 or 4 band night or whatever, you know, and there'd be like 20 people in the audience. But the bands 2 months before were glam, were suddenly wearing cut-off trousers, and they weren't dyeing their hair anymore, and they were like wearing lumberjack shirts.
Yeah.
I mean, even Steven Tyler started wearing boots and trying to lean that way a bit. It was like that thing that whether you liked it or not, it was there.
It was, yeah, you couldn't escape
and it was going to change things. And I got to admit, in retrospect, kind of like punk rock in my day, you need these things to come along.
Oh, definitely, yeah. A cleansing of it every now and again.
I got to admit, I didn't like listen to a lot of, you know, like the sort of Warrant-type rock bands.
Be careful what you say. One of my favourite bands.
No, but there were certain bands, in retrospect, I hadn't heard a lot of them. Somebody once, while I was drawing Pandora, was playing a lot of the records I hadn't heard, like Vane and stuff like that. and Danger Danger, and I was like, oh my God. I still came from a more sort of New York Dolls, Ramones.
Right.
My sort of thing was more punk leanings, even though that's not how people perceived me. They seemed to think I was total like glam rock guy. Even the Marionette album, people were always surprised that it was like punky. People say, you sound more like The Damned than what they thought it was going to sound like Rat or Tiger Towels or something, But it became clear to me that grunge needed to come along because it was kind of getting out of hand and there was too much of the same thing.
They're bands I'm a fan of, but I understand the reason why people gravitated more to the other stuff. It was becoming more cookie cutter to a lot of people. It was sounding the same. It was becoming more watered down. So, I totally understand why all of a sudden the more angrier stuff, the more harder edged, the more alternative stuff, it just suddenly became more popular. It was, especially for younger kids at the time.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you didn't relate to all these men, my sister, she was a full-on going to Marionette gigs, Dogs D'Amour, Hannah Rocks, and one day she was about 14 or 15. She looked at two people in their mid-20s with hair back home to heaven and eyeliner on, talking about the price of coffee. And she said it just suddenly looked ridiculous to her, and it was so weird.
Yeah, this isn't for me anymore. This isn't mine.
Yeah, she just stopped. For some reason, that moment, she looked around and went, this is ridiculous. And I was like, really? And she went, oh, no, it just looked stupid to me. And she stopped. She was a girl that went from punk to goth to glam and then stopped.
You mentioned the band Marionette, the band you was in. You was lead vocalist. You had a bit of a Phil Lewis vibe going off from the photos I've seen.
Well, to be honest with you, I loved the first Girl album, but I mean, you got to take into account back when Marionette were going, when we looked like that, LA Guns hadn't started yet. There was no LA Guns. There was no Guns N' Roses. So it's kind of the other way around because we supported Torme twice and he was a singer of Torme. But at that time, he just was wearing like cargo pants.
There you go. You influenced the whole LA Guns look.
But I mean, his girl look, it was sort of more Japanish.
Yeah.
So I can see in retrospect that someone could go, you look a bit Phil Lewis.
You were pre-Phil Lewis.
Yeah, it was. Later on, I started thinking Phil Lewis kind of looked like me.
There you go. Do you have fond memories of that time?
I have no memories.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I have no memories of Marionette. These days, people send me photos and pictures, and you're like, where was that?
Yeah.
What was that? What night was that? I mean, it really was as mad. And I mean, when Heavy Metal Records phoned up and said, we want to bring out a Marionette album, I think I went, what? I mean, it had not occurred to me making an album. I mean, we had enough songs to support a band.
Right.
I think we had a cover version and 6 songs. We're good for half an hour. I want to play a set. I want to come off and see the main band and shut up girls and get drunk. I don't want to come off and the night's ended. I never understood bands wanting the headline. It was like, no, half an hour, come off. There's still a night ahead of me.
Legendary.
Yeah, but that's how I wanted it to be. So we actually had to write songs to have enough to put on an album. And even when we went to record it, I think we had 2,000 quid and 7 days or something. My priority was, because I was on the dole, was how can I afford to be drunk for 7 days? Not like, how's my voice? Honestly, on the final day when the guy played the album back to me and the drummer, complete, I just was like, what the fuck is this? It was just awful. And then I remember getting a test pressing, and it was just awful. And one day we were at Dingwalls. Somebody started going to my brother, Kev, the bass player. Oh, you're all up yourself now. I'm not going to talk to anyone now. You've got 5 stars in sounds.
Right.
And he's going, what are you talking about? Like Sounds music paper, sometimes people got it the night before it came out sort of thing. There was a review of it, and the babysitters in one review, and I think they got 3 and we got 5. I didn't know Marionette were capable of anything this massive, blistering thrash and all this glowing thing. You sort of played the album and read the review and played the album and read the review, and you're like, what was he on when he reviewed this? But then Melody Maker reviewed it and said it was a classic. And you're like, I give in. Someone else reviewed it and said it was Motley Crue playing the Sex Pistols.
How did that translate to the public? Was the public giving it that kind of response as well?
Well, to be honest, I mean, it was just a scene. It was that weird thing where we had this whole scene going on, but the British music press, even Kerrang, didn't acknowledge it.
Right.
If we were doing the same thing in America, New York or LA or something, I think Kerrang would have been sending people over to review us.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But Kerrang didn't really seem to acknowledge what was going on in the club under its nose.
You say you don't remember much about the early part of Marionette, but you actually reformed in November 88 to support the Choir Boys, and I think was Lisa Dominique
Yes.
on the bill as well at the Dominion Theatre. Do you remember much about that night?
No, well, that Choir Boys might have been playing Donington, I think, but I know Spike at Donington dared me to reform, but, you don't dare me. It's so funny. I mean, I can't sing, but if you ask me to sing on something, I'll get up. I will.
Can't sing.
Because I don't care. I just don't care. You know what I mean? I mean, like every other year, I get up on stage with Ginger. The last time I got up with him, there was a review of it online. Ginger's got all his guests, all his superstar friends, Dragon from Backyard Babies and blah, blah, blah. I think I did Lick of the Promise by Aerosmith, which I thought I knew.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's my favourite rock song of all time. But the night before, I put it on and it was just nothing like how I thought it went.
Oh, shit.
Then I missed the sound check. I got there and they'd already sound checked. So I now was going home again to come back, knowing that when I got up on stage, I'd be hearing the band play it for the first time. And the most bizarre thing was there was 3 girl backing singers singing along with it. And it was really weird being on stage and for the first time you're singing and girls started chiming in. Because in my brain, I'm going, what are they doing?
Yeah, I bet it sounded huge with them singing as well.
To be honest, it was just confusing. I couldn't hear myself. I think the drummer messed up the beginning of it and Will stopped and looked back at him and he was like, sorry. But one review, it said that the whole night was great. Dragon, Backyard Babies, all these guest stars that got up. And it said the only thing that let the whole night down was Ray Zell.
Oh, no.
No, but you don't understand. If I've got to be something, it's got to be the best or the worst. If he just went, everything was great, everything was fine, it would be like, I want to steal the show or ruin it.
That's a great quote. Steal the show or ruin it. That's mint.
In Kerrang, the Marionette album in Kerrang, reviewed by Dave Dixon, it got 1K or 5.
Right.
I mean, I remember once we used to do surveys at Kerrang, which was for in-house. It was for our, to know what readers liked, what they didn't like. But we did a poll in the magazine one day that you just filled in. But we got the results. I don't think readers ever saw the results, but we saw the results. But I used to write View from the Bar in Kerrang, and it was voted the best thing in Kerrang and the worst.
There you go.
And that, to me, was perfect. That was perfect. I like extreme.
Yeah.
So bizarrely, I stood out in that review because I was the worst part of the night. I mean, I come from the Malcolm McLaren's school of I would take Sex Pistols over Led Zeppelin. So bad is good.
Brilliant stuff.
Back in the day, if Marionette got a good review in Sound's music paper, I used to send letters in saying I was at that gig and I will never read Sounds again if you write about crap like that anymore. But I wrote the letter insulting myself. So no one could insult me. I'm insult-proof.
I love it. You and Ginger used to live together for a while too, right?
What are you insinuating?
No, I just wondered how the two of you met and how you ended up living together.
Well, basically, I lived in Holborn above a wine bar, of all things. I was sitting up watching TV at about 4 in the morning. I got a call from him and he went, are you awake? I went, yeah. And he went, could I come over? And I went, yeah. And he went, can I move in? And I went, yeah. And then about half an hour later, because I never locked my door, the door opened and he came in. Oh, actually, I think another thing in there was, have you got any whiskey? And I think there was a yeah. But then he basically was sleeping on the couch. So he went, we should just get a flat together. And I went, okay. I think I just said okay to everything. I went, okay. And he had a manager at the time that found us a flat, which I think was across from Camden Girls' School. We both had animals, like little hamsters and gerbils and little rodents. There was a little garden patch out the front, which we buried our little pet animals in when they died. And the lady that lived a window above this patch of grass, or whatever it was called Lily. And Ginger actually wrote a song called Lily's Garden, which was about the dead rodents that were buried in Lily's garden.
Incredible.
I mean, we were both alcoholics. I mean, like the way people buy a pint of milk every day. He bought a bottle of whiskey one day, and I bought a bottle of whiskey the other day. So we drank whiskey all day, and then at night we went to the pub. I was pretty much living with Ginger for the recording of Earth vs. the Wild Hearts. That was going on, and I think he was probably writing Fuck, the PHUQ, probably round about that phase that we shared a flat together.
What can you tell us, Ray, about you getting the job at Kerrang in 1984? Did you approach them with the idea for a comic strip? Did you know anybody working there at the time, or what was the process?
Believe it or not, in the 70s, I did a comic strip for Sound's music paper. It was a comic strip called Soundwave, the Musical Avenger.
Right.
And he was like this superhero, similar, that he met the bands, and he was like a sonic-powered superhero.
Oh, very cool.
And Jeff Barton was the deputy editor of Sounds at that time. I just have this thing where every magazine or newspaper should have a comic strip. And Kerrang they had one called Gentle Eye Whore and another one called Zag Rot, but they lasted like 1 or 2 episodes. You know what I mean? They just never lasted. And I just thought it should have a comic strip. And I was at a party once telling people I was going to do a comic strip for Kerrang, and everybody encouraged me not to. They said, Kerrang doesn't want comic strips. It's not going to work. And that encouraged me to do it because they told me I shouldn't. I sent the first 2 episodes to Jeff Barton, and I said, here's your new comic strip. When do you want the next one?
Amazing.
And I got a letter back saying there was a thing called Extra Kerrang, which, came out apart from Kerrang, Extra Kerrang. It was like a sort of one-off quarterly. He said the first 2 were running in Extra Kerrang, and we need the next one for the next regular issue. It was that easy.
She was always like this kick-ass woman in like this mega male-dominated, over-the-top world. Where did that idea come from?
I grew up, do you know the Avengers, Emma Peel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up loving Emma Peel or Catwoman and Batman, and I think I just kind of liked strong females. You imagine if I did, a biker man, a hairy biker man, I don't think he would have lasted 10 minutes.
No.
I like fucking things up, and to me, a feisty girl who took no shit from men in a men's world made more sense than just another guy who just fit in perfectly with them. And that was the whole point. It was to show him who was boss, basically.
Brilliant. What was the initial reaction? Do you remember?
People loved her. Absolutely worshipped, adored her. The oddest, weirdest thing was when, I had to change it to modern Pandora, new metal, grunge, skatecore Pandora. That's when I got crap. That's when it went from love Pandora this week. It was now you're sold out. What the fuck she's supposed to be? And the best one was a guy coming up to me going, I know a biker gang, and Pandora Peroxide was their mascot. And if they ever see you, they're going to fucking kill you. And you're like, cheers.
Oh no.
Thank you.
Yeah. Was that your decision, or was that something from...
Oh, no, it was not my... at one point she was actually dropped, but I don't know if they got mail or if people complained. But the next thing, I think it was Phil Alexander at the time, had a talk. But I did a few versions of Upgrade. There was an original strip where Pandora was taken aboard an alien spacecraft by apes, pigs, and spacemen, and she was converted into new Pandora. But first of all, they liked it, but then they decided that no, she should just be brand new.
Right.
And somebody in editorial actually said to me, and I'm, paraphrasing, but I'm quoting, that give it a couple of weeks and no one will even remember Pandora Peroxide.
Oh, shit.
I know. Actually, you're looking at someone like, that's pretty insulting, but I thought they could be right. But, there's still those people that just absolutely, it's weird. Now I'm getting people getting in touch with me going, I'm only realising again that she was my female role model.
There you go.
You know what I mean? And I didn't really realise, but now reading her again and thinking about it, that is what she was my role model. And you're like, wow, what can you say?
Is it possible to kind of put into any description what it was like working for Kerrang during the late 80s and early 90s? I've had Crusher on the show before. It was
fantastic. If you can imagine your dream job, Jeff Barton was probably the best and worst thing that ever happened to me, because him and, Mick Wall, the journalist Mick Wall, they just encouraged me. They just had my back, if you know what I mean. But the trouble was, when things changed and different people come along, people were wanting me to tone down and write like everybody else. Here's a perfect example. Unbelievably, when I went to gigs, I would have people come up to me and ask me about writing for Kerrang, but unbelievably having reviews on them for me to read. And I'm like, how did you know you'd meet me? Why have you got a review in your pocket? But I used to tell people who wrote to me or whatever, or was a big fan of my writing, that to get to work for Kerrang, you've got to be an individual. Don't write like me. Don't write like Mick Wall. Don't write like Derek Oliver. Don't write like Malcolm Dome. Jeff he liked me because I wrote like me. I didn't write like anyone else. That's what he liked. But at the end, Kerrang wanted me to write like everybody else.
I want to read a review because Ray Zell's wrote it or Dave Reynolds has wrote it.
Well, that was the thing. People used to say, I didn't care if I was into the band or not. I knew it'd be fun because you wrote it.
Yeah.
And I went, well, that was the whole point. I wanted it to be enjoyable. But at the end, you know, if I wrote like me, they would change it into, you'd think, well, why didn't you just write it yourself? You know what I mean? Why didn't you just write it yourself? Why did you ask me to review it if you knew what you wanted? I mean, even to a point of reviewing an album and somebody going, are you sure that's 4K? Are you sure it's not 3? And you're like, have you heard it? And they're like, well, no, but how about we give it 3? And you're like, why did you ask me to review it? You know, what is that? But like I say, at the end when people were asking me, they wanted to write for Kerrang and wanted tips, I used to say, be original, be yourself. At the end, I used to say, you know how everyone writes? Write like that. So I completely turned round.
What would a normal day be like in, like, say, 1988, if you can divulge?
Well, to be honest, what was amazing about Kerrang back then, the typical thing of, because I obviously didn't work in the office, but back then, you know, we didn't have computers. I took my work in, like, handwritten, and the secretary typed it in because I couldn't even type. I would go in and normally people would be like Crusher and Mick Wall would be sitting around with, like, this was before Red Bull, everyone would be sitting around with a Lucasade, nursing their hangover.
Okay.
But by lunchtime, we all went down the pub to about 3 or 4. Then they'd come back and do a couple of hours work and then you went down the pub again. But also sometimes what stopped happening at the end, bands would have like showcases on in the afternoon, you know, for the press.
Yeah.
So there'd even be like an afternoon gig with free drink. I mean, do you remember the band Sugar Ray?
I do indeed, yeah. Mark McGrath.
I went to see a showcase of them and it was just press, drinking free drink, watching Sugar Ray. But at the end, I mean, Kerrang became a proper sensible corporate magazine and you went in, you handed your work in and you said hello and you left. I remember somebody had a bottle of Jack Daniels on their shelf for about 2 years. Every time I went in, I'd notice a bottle of Jack Daniels was still sitting there. But in my day, when we had the bottle of Jack Daniels sent over, it was devoured in seconds. I mean, we just looked at it and you watched the Jack Daniels draining down the bottle. But someone could go, sad old rock days, but what can you do if they were fun? You can't pretend it wasn't fun. It was fun, but it was of its time. And like I say, grunge changed everything. So if you don't like fun, then, you know, then fair play to you.
Off the top of your head, Ray, do you have any personal favourite Pandora strips which you did in interactions with bands that you're particularly proud of, or any maybe reactions from bands themselves when they saw the strips which jumped to mind?
In a good way or a bad way?
Either, I don't mind.
No, well, to be honest, the only bad ones I've ever had or of note was years ago I had a journalist from another magazine told me they were interviewing Manowar, and Manowar were offended by Pandora. And you think, you know, a band that wear furry nappies and wave plastic swords, I'd like to think they had a sense of humour. But no sense of humour. But I think there was a Blink-182, someone told me they were upset over one. And again, you thought they were a fun band. And then the only other one that really stands out was Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins. I think there was one where he was trapped in a cupboard with a mop, and I think he thought the mop was a girl member of his band, a bass player or something, but he did not see the humour in that. But the guy that really, really took umbrage, I've never used the word umbrage, but it came to mind, was, you know, Charlie Simpson.
From Busted and Fightstar.
Yeah, but it was weird because it was like, well, way to make yourself stand out like a sore thumb. Because I think Pandora called Fart Star and just made fun of, you know, this guy that thought he was now a real rocker, you know, but it was just fun. But he was really offended. I mean, they even got someone to draw a comic strip getting the best of Pandora, which Kerrang printed. But it was like, to me, again, it was a compliment that they were that upset.
Yeah,
that they had to do.
You've got that reaction.
You know, whereas Skin, I used to treat the rock band Skin in the same way, but they loved it. I mean, they asked Pandora to be on the cover of one of their singles.
One of the EPs, yes. I remember that. The Look But Don't Touch EP, I believe.
But I mean, that shows you the difference. They embraced it and thought it was funny. And that, I understand that mentality. That is my mentality.
Kind of to wrap things up, Ray, your artwork now, it's spanned many, many decades, but I guess it's always, your part of it's always stayed true to that original vision. What does the future hold for Pandora and Auntie P, do you think?
For now, I mean, it's, you know, like baby steps for me now. To be honest with you, I didn't even want my name on the website. I just wanted it to be about Pandora and Pandora Peroxide. But the fact that I think we already had RayZell.com, See, I'm not very technical. I just thought you could use rayzell.com to go there, but Julia, my web lady, went, it'll confuse people if they go to rayzell.com and it just says Pandora when they get there. So suddenly it became about me and Pandora Peroxide. I thought, well, if my name's got to be there, then you've got to have Marionette in it then. You know what I mean? So I became a part of it, but that wasn't my original master plan.
No, I think it's great though. I think you should embrace it all.
But the fact that I'm like, signed artwork, there are brand new people just discovering Pandora through this. So I suppose what's the point of signed artwork by someone you don't even know who they are? So I suppose in retrospect, it does make sense to have me muscle in on the deal.
There you go. Do you still enjoy drawing it?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I prefer writing to drawing. I prefer scripting it to drawing. It just takes too long. Like I say, by hand, penciling things, inking things, rubbing out the inks, drawing the colours, covering up mistakes. It's one of those things like, when you're in a recording studio and you've got 2 hours, the next thing you've got 10 minutes, and you're like, where did that go? So I call it like studio clock. I think something took me 40 minutes. I look round and it's 3 hours have gone.
Oh, shit.
And it's like, it doesn't make sense for me. Every time I think I'm going to do it in half the time. I don't know why, but it just takes too long.
Mate.
I think you get in the zone and don't realise that hours are going, not minutes,
Yeah,
if you know what I mean.
Definitely.
Studio clock time.
Studio clock time indeed, mate. But I love that it's all come together and it's pushing the Pandora brand and legacy. It's still going strong. I love it, mate. And I'm glad we got to have this chat and we got it all worked out.
Anyway, it was a pleasure talking to me.
Massive thanks to Ray Zell for being a great guest on today's Straight to Video podcast. Loved hearing all those stories, and I urge you to check out rayzell.com to keep up to date with all things Pandora and Pandora Peroxide. If you want to catch up with earlier episodes of this podcast, they can all be found at stvpod.com, along with some Straight to Video music, videos and merchandise, and the Straight to Video 80s Video Shop as a brand new website too over at 80svideoshop.co.uk. There you can pick up some merch to show your support for the shop, along with links to our eBay page, with all proceeds from sales going to the upkeep of the shop itself. It'd be great to see some of you in person though too, if you can make it, when we're open on Saturdays and Sundays from 11 till 3 p.m. That is all for today's show. Hope you've enjoyed it, and as always, thanks for the great support, and I look forward to chatting again real soon.